there are so many ways to change a garment, from a fiber, from a dye stuff, from a type of stitching or knitting, all these various components of a garment. The result and cost can vary widely. And so, looking at a garment efficiently by, in our opinion, reverse engineering a garment, sitting down and saying, look, I know what I need to pay. Let's have a dialogue about who my customer is in this space, what their expectation of value and quality looks like. And again, there's no secrets in margins. In our industry, there's pretty set margins generally. And so looking at cost component first reverses what's been occurring in our industry for a long time. When I was a buyer years ago, my divisional would look at me and say, hey, bring everyone in a room and let's negotiate on the cheapest price possible, because there was at that time this expectation that the cheapest cost kind of wins. That's a pretty loaded thing, because
comes with compromises all over.
Yeah, So I like the fact that we kind of reverse that we sit down with our clients and we dialogue about, look, where do you need to be costed to maximize your margin? And then let's talk about all the things we can put into the garment to achieve both this kind of cost margin objective, but also provide the satisfaction from a customer level. Transparency of supply chain goes a lot further today. I think a transparent conversation between the buyer and a manufacturer, really going further than just the surface levels of hey, what's my fabric price per yard? And hey, yours is more expensive than that one. It only tells such a minor part of the story. And we find that some buyers jump to conclusions very rapidly, looking only at one very small component of manufacturing, like, let's say, a fabric cost that might be out, without really having more of a bigger conversation, because the result is, how do I get this particular cost on a garment? Where do I manufacture it? What type of fabric do I do? There's so many aspects to the final garment cost that really spending time to develop the net cost, the true cost, is important. And there's shortcuts from a factory standpoint to minimize cost. And so, we talk about fabric qualities. There's also sewing thread qualities. There's dyeing qualities. You can shift, a dye stuff that's going to have a result that's going to be longer lasting and less lasting, and that can impact cost. One of the things too that we're finding is specs, overall specifications of a garment, and sewing allowances. So, looking at a various spec, we've got different people that have come in and they really haven't gone through the heavy lifting or don't have the skill set to look at specification and understand that a smaller spec, a garment that's smaller versus a garment that's bigger, has less or more consumption of fabric. So if a fabric costs X and you're actually utilizing less fabric, the overall garment cost is less. And certain tolerances can impact that. So a factory will lean all the way to a negative tolerance because everything has to have a tolerance to spec. Fabrics are organic. And if they lead to a lesser tolerance and they manufacture everything a little bit smaller, you can actually incrementally eke out lesser cost to the fabric.
Break down the difference between DDP and FOB.
Sure.
And then let's talk about some of that impact of one decision versus the other.
Yeah, definition of FOB is free on board point. It's the point at which the manufacturer turns the ownership over to the buyer of a particular program. And those FOB points can be various places in the world. It's a Incoterm that says, look, this is where we're doing it. Most FOB,
releasing the goods
we're
to
releasing
you.
The goods. You own them and you're paying us.
And then you're taking care of getting it wherever it needs to go from that point.
Depending on where you negotiate your FOB point. Most of FOB points are this foreign country of manufacture. It could be at factory, it could be at port. One of the big suggestions that I would have is that if you're buying FOB, negotiate FOB at port. of departure. Some people don't really go into that detail, and so a factory will quote FOB factory, and then you've got to figure out the trucking logistics to get it from the factory to the port, and then from the port to your warehouse through customs. So FOB negotiation is a really important thing for sure. DDP is delivery duty paid, and so that's another Incoterm. But if what that indicates is that the cost of this particular garment or program includes the cost of the garment and all its components, the cost of all the transportation, the cost of all duties, all port costs, all inland if you're doing DDP warehouse, like your warehouse particular. You can do DDP port if you have a really good domestic trucking, that you think you're affordable on, then you can pick up trucking from a port. But the manufacturer must get it all cleared and done. And so, the safest method today, if you're a buyer that wants to ensure accurate margin, is that you negotiate effectively with a manufacturer and say, look, I want DDP warehouse. Because it really says, hey, that manufacturer has to cover all the costs. And once it gets to your warehouse, then and only then the title transfers to the buyer. You've managed all those details, and all those cost components are then loaded into that. And I think, especially where freight rates have fluctuated wildly today, people that have negotiated effectively on a DDP warehouse cost have fared far better than those who have estimated a freight cost at FOB and woke up one day to realize that these costs are dramatically different.